Wow. Crazy.
All right, it's 6:30. Let's call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Belvedere City Council. Madam Clerk, could we call the roll, please?
Councilmember Cooper,
Present.
Councilmember Wilkinson. Present. Mayor Lynch.
Here.
Councilmember Mark,
Here.
Councilmember Chemnitzer. Here.
Thank you. Let's turn now to agenda item 3, reports and presentations. 3A is the city council reports. Do any of my colleagues have reports of council? Councilmember Cooper.
I was asked to bring up the issue of I don't know what they're called, but they're electric bikes, but they have those very fat tires. And the kids are riding them all over, I guess, going to school. I'm not sure where they are, but a couple of community members were concerned at the speed that they travel and that they are have other kids behind them who may not be wearing a helmet. And so the issue came up. I don't know if we have any policies about that. I know Mill Valley's dealing with it, and I think another city is also dealing with it, but it might be something we want to look into. That's it.
Thank you. And Mr. Zadnik, is that something that we could ask staff to look into and report back to on at a future date?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak with Jason Moo, Chief of Police.
Thanks very much. Any other reports by council members under item 3A? Well, let me just say, I wanted to, for anyone who wasn't in attendance, note that we held our 43rd annual town hall style meeting last Thursday, May 4, here at the community park. We heard state of the city reports from our city manager, Robert Zadnik, and from police chief Jason Wu. We celebrated our Citizen of the Year Award honorees, Bob McCaskill and Mel Owen. And I just want to thank our entire City Hall team that made the event possible. I want to thank everyone who attended, and congratulations again to Mel Owen and to Bob McCaskill. All right, let's move on to next agenda item, which is the city manager report. Mr. Zadnik.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lynch. I have a few updates this evening. I'll start off by talking a little bit about the winter rains. Thanks to the late winter season that we've been experiencing, the 2023 fire season will be coming a little bit later this year, which is a positive. However, this extra moisture has brought a lot of tall weeds and unwanted vegetation to Belvedere, which is a challenge. So to help address this fire risk, we're going to be hosting another round of the Belvedere Curbside Vegetation Pickup Program. Starting on May 23rd and every Tuesday until the end of June, residents can take advantage of this free program by placing their yard trimmings and cut vegetation at the curb edge for pickup. DPW crews will off-haul that material from the site and will chip it at the city's corporation yard, again at no charge to the resident. Each year, this program becomes more popular. Last season, residents disposed of nearly 400 yards of flammable material that could otherwise still be sitting on our hillsides. There's no limit to the number of weeks you can participate. Our only request is that you or your gardener be mindful to not block parking or diminish roadway access when positioning piles near the curb. Additional program details will be mailed to residents later this month, and we hope everyone can participate. I'll speak briefly on the housing element. In January, the city adopted a new substantially compliant 6-cycle housing element. After a public review period, we sent that document to the Department of Housing and Community Development for their review. And 90 days later, on May 1st, HCD staff responded and provided a list of comments and a letter. There are roughly 12 pages of comments in total. That letter is posted on the city's website and was sent to the ARC as a courtesy. City staff, the city's consultants, and council members Cooper and Mark are working to develop responses to address a majority of HCD's comments. Some of these responses are simple, where we will be providing data to clarify inquiries or perhaps correcting inaccurate assumptions from HCD. There are more complex examples where HCD has requested in-depth sites analysis for locations that are earmarked for higher density. They've also asked for more justification on how our proposed ADU projections will be met. We are working under an aggressive schedule to get responses drafted, and we'll be conducting the extra needed analyses. But with that said, we're eager to get a response back to HCD soon, and we look forward to working with the State Housing Department to further improve and refine our housing element. And on a separate subject, I'll finally mention that the Mallard Point project application is also progressing. In July of last year, the developer submitted what the city determined to be a complete application. However, the question of whether or not that application complies with zoning, the general plan, and other state housing laws has been ongoing. The developer has requested an infill and affordability exemption for the CEQA process, and over the last several months has been excuse me, providing a number of items that are necessary for staff to determine if that exemption can apply. Under the state housing laws, this application is limited to 5 public hearings. Staff will be considering how best to use these meetings to inform the public while allowing the Planning Commission and City Council the opportunity for a substantive input on the application and qualifying entitlements. If you are looking for more information on the Mallard Point project, feel free to visit the city's website under planning. And we want to keep the website updated as new documents come available. That's all I have, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zadnik. Any questions at this time?
I do have a few. You mentioned the rain season in relation to fire hazards. Does Belvedere have any say or involvement in the water district's potential rate changes going forward?
Yeah, generally, no, that's a separate entity.
Yeah. So, but
however, we may have some influence, or at least could open the discussion with their general manager about.
I'm just curious about their process, which I assume is their board and their discussions.
They're separate.
And on the housing element, is the letter and collateral material on the website for people to see? Should they wish it?
Yes, it's on the website. It's in 2 locations. It is on blueprintforbelvedere.org, or you can simply just go to the city's website under the planning section and find it under the general plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Robert, is it correct that we received copies of public comments that were sent to HCD regarding Belvedere's housing element?
Yes, it is. We did receive those comments. They come from HCD directly, which we've also posted on the city's website.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Zadnik at this time? All right, before we move on, thank you for that report, Robert. It's excellent. I just wanted to thank again Councilmember Cooper and Vice Mayor Mark for their help on diving into this revision to the housing element update. It's an extraordinary amount of work to be done in a very short period of time. So we really appreciate it.
Do our best.
All right, let's move.
We
Oh,
do
I'm
have
sorry.
public comment.
Thank you. Before we move on, is there any public comment on this agenda item 3B? Seeing none here in the room, Madam Clerk, are there any online?
We do. We have Mr. Rothman.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. With respect to the report, the housing element aspect of it, from reading the article in the Independent Journal, which involved the city's comments on it and what the reporter found in the letter from the state, I would conclude that you're never going to satisfy them until they have given their bureaucracy an infinite amount of work. I see their job as keeping you busy and keeping themselves employed. I want to bring to your attention that there is a ballot initiative that has already been submitted to the state, to the Attorney General for the final wording. And that ballot initiative will be on the November 2024 election, a ballot. And I'm sure they're going to be able to collect all the signatures necessary and more. It will change the state constitution, and it will bring control of zoning and planning back to the communities where that development is taking place. So I would urge the council members and the staff to look into that constitutional amendment initiative, and if possible, become involved with other cities in changing these rules. And I'm telling you, from what I read, city after city, county after county are having whatever they say they're going to do. The state bureaucracy finds some way to object to it. You're never going to succeed in satisfying them, because it's their business to keep their jobs and increase their scope of activity and their incomes. So please look into the state ballot initiative to change the Constitution to restore community control to communities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Do we have other comments?
Mayor Lynch, I see no other hands raised.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment on that item, and let's move now to agenda item 3C, which is a block captain report on the emergency preparedness training event presented by Adam Gavser. Welcome. Is that microphone working?
It's on.
Press the green button or the face.
Hi,
Hi, thank you.
good evening, Mayor Lynch and City Council members. My name is Adam Gavser, and I'm here on behalf of the Belvedere Block Captain Program. I wanted to give you an update on a plan that we are putting into motion for a June 4th community-wide emergency preparedness day that the Belvedere Block Captains are hosting, and it is sponsored by the City of Belvedere. I encourage you all to attend. We have lots of fun stuff planned, mostly educational. The block captains will be focused on letting people know about the program, encouraging community members to sign up for Alert Marin and to register on the Belvedere residents website. We will also be demonstrating our amazing radios that we received from a Belvedere Community Foundation grant. And we will be giving the public an opportunity to play with those and hopefully encouraging people to join the block captain program. We have Chief Wu will be there talking about go bags and encouraging residents to prepare their go bags in the event of an emergency and an evacuation. Dr. Cromwell and his medical team will be there with the giving tours of the medical trailer that we have. And he'll be teaching CPR, and we'll also have Narcan samples to give out to community members. The Belvedere Community Foundation will be there handing out gas shutoff wrenches to those that may not already have them, which we received, Belvedere Block Captains received a grant from BCF to purchase those during COVID. And then we'll also have Tiburon Fire Department there doing a barbecue, which will be free for all attendees. So again, I encourage you all to come out. It is on June 4th, starting at 11:30 till 1:30. And we're hoping all block captains will arrive early and help us set up. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions for Mr. Gavser at this time? Yes.
Evening, Adam. I have a couple of questions. You talked about recruitment for the Belvedere block captains, and I was curious to know how that's going, meaning do you feel like you're close to the number of block captains you need? Are there specific areas of town that are struggling?
Generally speaking, we do have a lot of block captains, but as we all know, people travel a lot, so redundancy is key. So we're always recruiting. We always have people that are dropping out as well. People travel a lot. So I think in general, to answer your question, yes, we have enough that could get us through an emergency response. But again, we're always looking for new recruits.
A follow-up question, not on that, but my ears pricked up when you talked about Narcan, because I am always aware of that in terms of the sort of teenage, young adult population. And I'm just curious, outside of this event, are you considering ways to potentially distribute that against potential populations that might be more at risk or have friends who might be more at risk?
I will defer to Dr. Cromwell. This has been his project to get it out into the community. I believe he is working on projects to make it available to community members and also to a lot of education around that too. And Dr. Cromwell is leading a medical response team that is an adjunct to the block captain program. So it wouldn't really fall within my purview, but that is something that Dr. Cromwell is working on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for organizing and presenting this to the community. Similar to council members Wilkinson's question, you mentioned the registering for the website. Is that a similar response list that the city has right now, or do we have multiple lists?
I believe there is a block captain list, and then there's general homeowners or residents can register themselves. It's all self-reported. I believe the city clerk maintains that list, and it is not publicly accessible. It is available to the police and to the city as needed.
So when folks should register for your list, that wouldn't be this list.
There are two things. Again, Alert Marin is about countywide
Okay,
alerts.
okay.
And the block captains use that as our initial activation of the program. So we're both getting our block captains registered, and then we have to get them registered through Lori Nielsen. I give her the name. She puts it into a block captain call out list. So when we're doing trainings in any event, the block captains get a specific notice that the block captain program has been activated. More generally, we also want the community, and Chief Wu and several of us were meeting, and Chief Wu felt strongly that that was important for us to really try to get as much adherence to that as possible, because that is a way that the emergency responders will be communicating with residents as far as if there's an evacuation, if there's anything that's going on, they can be very focused on where they're notifying. Like Lori Nielsen today was talking about, she can send something to just West Shore residents. If there's something about boats are unmoored and they're going to be crashing into your home, they can send a notice there to keep an eye out for that.
To West Shore residents or to the
Correct.
block captains on West Shore?
No, West Shore residents.
Okay,
So we want to, ideally, we want 100% of our community signed up for Alert Marin.
okay, because we would like that for the city too, to be able to communicate for emergency purposes and so forth. And I'd love to be able to have some way to cross those in some way if it's an opt-in, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is opted.
Thank you.
Other questions at this time?
I just want to thank Adam and Dr. Cromwell and everyone who's helping to organize this. I think it's a really important community event, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank the DPW for their proposed assistance. They're going to be helping us getting tables and chairs out there, and we have, and also to Chief Wu and his team for coming out and helping us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adam. Thanks for the report. And thanks for all your efforts.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll take public comment on that item. Is there anyone here who wish to address that agenda item? And Madam Clerk, do we have anybody online?
Mayor Lynch, there are no hands raised.
Alrighty, we'll close the public comment. We'll move on to agenda item 3D, a progress update from the Communications Task Force. And thank you, Kevin Burke, for being here
Thank
to
you.
deliver that.
Thank you. And the lectern screen is not up. Thank you, Beth.
Do you mind if I just provide a brief intro? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Kevin, while you're setting up, I'll just provide a brief intro. So part of our annual retreat, we said we were going to focus, one of our focuses was going to be communications. We've set up a small task force of Kevin, who's giving the presentation, Shane Steele, who's here in the audience, and Jane and myself to start moving this forward. And Kevin's here tonight to provide an update of where we stand.
Apologies, just 1 second. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, I think we're ready. Good evening, Mayor Lynch, council members, staff, and residents of Belvedere. As Sally just said, I'm here to provide an update from the Communications Task Force. Again, this represents the work of the entire team. I'm just the one who drew the short straw to present it. So let me give a little bit of context. As Sally said, there were 6 initiatives that were identified at the 2023 annual planning meeting. Today, we're here to talk about communications. Since that meeting, the City Council created a task force to assess the city's current communications approach. And this task force is in the process of assessing the current communication approach, and will come back to the city with a recommendation on how better to serve and support the community with an enhanced communication strategy. What we decided to do to ensure that it reflected the needs of the community and the voices of our residents is we put together a very disciplined approach. First, we are going to go out, or we have gone out and solicited resident feedback. From that feedback, we're going to set communications objectives and metrics so we can be sure at the end of the year we can measure our success and adjust accordingly. Based on that, we will develop a strategy and operating plan. We'll create new communication assets, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We'll then go back out to the community once we create those draft documents to ensure the community or the assets are addressing the needs of the community. We'll make any necessary revisions, we'll implement that. And again, we'll go back and evaluate and refine as we go. And so, we really want it to be this virtuous cycle where we're continuing to improve the communications as we learn more from the community. As a first step, as I said, we went out to residents to solicit their feedback. We're excited to share that we sent an email out to 1,300 residents. We had an opening rate, which is extremely high for an email of that type. 737 opened the email. Of those who opened the email, 170 completed the survey, which was 10+ questions. And then we also invited residents to participate in focus groups that followed the quantitative survey, where Councilmember Cooper and Shane Steele, who's a member of the task force, actually talked more deeply about some of the issues that we were contemplating addressing and how best to address those issues. So I'm going to give you just a few highlights from the survey results, and then I'll talk about key implications and next steps. The first is we asked the residents, well, how do you feel we're doing in terms of overall communications that come from the city of Belvedere? And I guess the good news is that we're in the middle. So we have a decent foundation. 70 to 80% of residents say that they feel that we're doing a somewhat good to a mostly good job. However, obviously that's not good enough. So we have this as a very nice benchmark, if you will, but I do think it's foundational, and our goal would be to move more and more of the community members to the right. So that would be in the yellow and the green. So mostly good and very good. We asked across 4 different dimensions: relevant, useful, timely, and transparent. The first 2 we tended to score a bit higher, whereas the other 2, timely and transparent, we tended to score a little bit lower. But again, lots of room for improvement here. We then also asked residents to tell us how well they felt they were informed about specific issues that we knew were important to the community. And you can see here from services available, city council initiatives, all the way over to how government works. we had varying degrees of response in terms of how well residents felt they were informed about these issues. Here again, anywhere from 70 to 90% of the residents are saying they're somewhat to mostly to very informed about these issues. Our goal through the communications process and the revisions we are going to be making would to be move more of the residents to a green or a blue, which is mostly in very. But again, what we love about this is that we know where we stand today, so we have a really clear benchmark as we chart our progress going forward. We then asked residents, well, what else did you want to hear about? I mean, when you're thinking about some of the topics, what really bubbles up to the top for you? And if you go clockwise from top right or 1 o'clock, order of priority, housing was at the top of folks' list, followed by infrastructure. After that, disaster preparedness, coyote management, climate action, and then there were little ones and twos of certain things where people had the opportunity to fill in. And so again, here we feel good because we have clear direction in terms of what, at least in the near term, our residents would like to hear more about. And then finally, we also wanted to understand, well, how would you like to be communicated to? Which is the best channel to get this information out to you? And by far, the email newsletter is something that residents would really like to see as the primary communication method from the city. While they did talk about the website and postal mail and meetings and even text messages, again, the email newsletter was by far and above the most preferred channel of communication. And so we really are going to focus a lot of our energy there. So when we did the quantitative, as I said, we also did the focus groups. We then met as a team. We assessed all of the feedback from the residents. And these are the top insights and implications that we have decided are going to guide our work going forward. The first would be overall, residents want us to improve the clarity, simplicity, and organization of communications. They want more frequent communications, and they'd like to understand that they're coming on a certain schedule, so they're not so unexpected unless there's something that requires, if it's an emergency or it's a hot topic, they understand that, but they like to see a more standard cadence of those messages. They'd also like us to improve the usability and the design of the city website. We got a lot of commentary in terms of it's a useful tool. We wish it worked a little bit better. We wish it was easier to use, and the information I needed was easier to find. They also would like to hear more about what the city council is working on. So they'd love to hear via the email, how is the city council progressing against those 6 initiatives that they've identified at the beginning of the year, and anything else that sort of bubbled up to the top of the list for the city council. And then finally, they want to hear, or they want a way to ask questions and provide feedback to both the council, but then also the city itself. And then importantly, they want to make sure that there's a way or a mechanism for them to get a response back, that they understand, well, if I offer this feedback, what happened to that feedback? Is something happening with it? Is it now going to influence the way the city's working or the way it addresses some of the community's needs? In terms of next steps, we've finished the focus groups via the survey and the survey, as I just shared with you. We've also selected a new website platform provider. We went out to RFP. We solicited responses from a number of technology providers, and together with the other team members and staff, we chose a vendor to help us with revamping the city website, and we're quite pleased with the work we're doing with them so far. By July, we plan to come back to the council with a communication strategy and operating plan. We will also have the new website and those key communication assets that I discussed. Late July, we'll go back out to the community and get that additional feedback. And then our hope is to get everything launched sometime in August. And that is our update. Any questions?
Wonderful, Kevin. Thank you. Any questions for Kevin at this time? Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, remarkable, Kevin. Thank you to you and to the entire team and to our council members, Cooper and Wilkinson. We made tremendous amount of progress since our March 1 strategic planning meeting, and very grateful for all the work that's been done to this point. And we look forward to the rest of the work in the August launch. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open this item up for public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to address this agenda item? Seeing no hands, let me ask if there's anybody online.
Mayor Lynch, there are no hands raised.
All right, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to the next agenda item, 3E, which is an update from the Coyote Task Force. Presentation by Rebecca Dimitrick of Humane Wildlife Control. Just while we're setting that up, and to introduce Ms. Dimitrick, those who've been following this issue may recall that following our meeting in this room in, I believe, February, we identified Ms. Dimitrick and her team at Humane Wildlife Control as an expert that we wanted to bring in and help us assess our current situation and address how best to approach it in light of all the other work that has been done to control this issue beginning last summer. So we look forward to this report.
Horrible. Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
That-
Appreciate it. And thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to click here and see if this plays. This is Two Coyotes at about 10 o'clock at night. Is that playing? Yes. And this is from a surveillance camera up at Belvedere Way and Belvedere Ave. And these maps, oh, let me go back. Hang on one second. So yes, okay, that was it. So these maps represent the reported sightings that we collected from Marin Humane Society and Belvedere PD. Based on these, we believe that the coyotes are accessing Belvedere from Tiburon using San Rafael Avenue. As for the actual boots on the ground survey, my canine associate Angus and I were in the field at various times during those 5 days, driving and lots of walking, looking for coyotes and the things that might attract them. And here's Angus. He's an incredible hound. He's got a great nose. And this is a clip of him showing me where the coyotes were. It was just, it was about dawn. We were up there pre-dawn. And let's see if this plays. So during the survey, we observed 2 coyotes and they traveled as a pair. But it's unclear whether or not they are pair bonded, whether they're a mated pair or siblings. I am confident, however, there was no natal den on Belvedere last year, 2022. A natal den is where they have their pups. And in 2023, now there is no evidence of a natal den either. So if they don't live here, what's drawing them to Belvedere Island? We believe their presence can be attributed to plentiful food resources, both natural and human related, and a relatively hospitable landscape. I found some issues at a couple of local establishments in the commercial area, including feeding of wildlife outside Woodlands Market. And across the boulevard near Tiburon Peninsula Club, there is a significant ongoing issue with trash. But in the residential area of Belvedere, I found very few trash receptacles with any issues. Overall, Belvedere was impressively clean. Just to note, though, as of January 2022, cities were required by law to provide residents with organic waste bins for kitchen scraps, including meat and dairy. Could this account for an increase in rodents and other wildlife, including coyotes? Maybe. However, Belvedere's landscape is very lush with lots of thick ivy, which provides incredible harborage for rats. So if rats are attracted to Belvedere, they have lots of great places to hide. And with rats come the animals that prey on them, like coyotes, fox, and great horned owls. Sorry, this is gross, but we noticed a lot of dog feces on the roads, domestic dog feces, and rats eat dog excrement. They're attracted to it, they'll eat it. We also noticed quite a few rodent poison bait stations around. Some were unlabeled, which is not legal, but there are quite a few of them around town. From speaking with residents, the consensus seems to be there has been and may very well still be an abundance of rats in Belvedere. And this certainly could explain why coyotes are attracted to the area. It could also explain their behavior towards dogs. Some coyotes, especially those with territory to protect, like a pair, will perceive dogs as competition and a threat. Sometimes they will follow or escort a person with a dog. This is not predatory and has nothing to do with the human companion. It's one canid messaging another canid. This usually happens when there is food nearby or pups nearby. The coyotes that we encountered responded appropriately to humans. They fled quickly when approached. So I don't feel that they are either food or human conditioned, and they do not represent a threat to public safety. However, from the reported encounters and how they behaved towards Angus, I believe the recent altercations between dogs and coyotes was about perceived resources and competition for those perceived resources, more than predatory in nature. And this is consistent with scientific research. Now, for those listening and who have had injured pets, I am not excusing this behavior whatsoever or making light of any pet injuries, but providing an explanation for why these bites might have occurred so that we can find the best way moving forward to prevent them in the future. Briefly, let's have a look at the incidents involving dogs, ones that we are aware of. There may be others out there that we're not aware of. In 2022, there was a report of 3 coyotes rushing a large dog in its yard. There was no fence, though. One small dog was left outside. It was reported missing and sadly found deceased the next day. I believe it was the next day. In 2023, in January, there were 2 reports of coyotes rushing off-leash dogs, and 2 accounts where dogs in their yards were bitten on their back ends. Another incident where 2 small dogs actually approached a coyote in their backyard. The actual physical altercation was not witnessed, but one of the dogs sustained small injuries that could have been caused by the coyote defending itself or in that altercation. And then in February, we have the loss of a small dog on West Shore that was found deceased. According to a neighbor, they saw a coyote with the dog in its mouth. Over the last 3 months, reported sightings have decreased significantly. This map shows reported sightings from March through May 5th. For some, I am sure this does not provide any relief. I hear residents, they want to feel safe and they don't want to have to worry about their dogs being outside in their yards. So let's look at some solutions that we're recommending. But first, it's important to understand that coyotes will always be a part of the landscape no matter what. Simply put, when one is removed, another individual quickly fills that vacancy. That's why we say 1 minus 1 equals 1. The most effective way to reduce the presence of and prevalence of coyotes in Belvedere is to make it less inviting, less hospitable. And this can be done, this can be accomplished through a community-wide commitment to reducing attractants and making them feel unwelcomed. We can start by reducing the habitat that supports the rodents, reducing what the rodents, depend upon for survival, which is food and shelter. For properties with thick ivy and dense vegetation, I recommend cutting back the ground cover and thinning the brush at the base, opening it up at the ground level. This will deter both coyotes as well as rodents. When clearing brush, residents should be reminded to be mindful of the native dusky-footed wood rat, our native rat, which is actually protected by the state. It's considered a species of special concern. They're the ones that build these amazing stick houses, which are also protected, cannot be dismantled without a permit. I know that sounds weird. It would be good also if property owners, everybody individually, would take a look around their house, make sure there are no hiding spots under their structures, no places where mice, rats, or other wildlife can hide or make a home. We do not recommend the use of poison because it can get into the food chain and kill other wildlife. It is also a risk to dogs and cats. This is a quick clip of a rat removing a big chunk of poison from a bait station. And the takeaway here is that the poisons don't stay in the boxes. It's stalled, but that's okay. Anyway, you can see that large piece of poison that the rat is going to go cache in the property somewhere that a dog or a cat could potentially find. As for the garbage and compost material, we saw a few places that had these amazing bungee systems that kept the lids closed tightly. So we recommend that everybody uses those if possible. For those who are worried about coyotes entering their yard, we recommend coyote-proof fencing, if not an entire property. At least doing a small section of the yard could provide some peace of mind. And while walking, we recommend dogs be on a short leash at all times, no longer than a 6-foot lead. And be prepared for an encounter with a loose dog or a coyote. Know what to do to keep you and your dog safe. Additionally, we are recommending Belvidere adopt a progressive and comprehensive coyote response plan, which will provide guidance on when and how to respond to various levels of coyote activity in the community. The plan also recommends expanding community participation to increase reporting of coyote sightings. The more reported sightings, the more detailed reports, the more we will begin to know the coyotes that frequent Belvidere. Do we have a mated pair that resides in Belvidere? Or is Belvidere just part of one family's territory? Or are these siblings from Tiburon just checking things out? Why is this important? Because if it is a mated pair and Belvidere is part of their territory, they will keep all other coyotes out. If Belvidere is not within an established territory, there will be a continuous influx of nomads or transient coyotes. Frankly, you do want Belvidere to be controlled by a pair of coyotes. They can be reminded of healthy boundaries and then let them eat all the rodents and keep other coyotes out. To conclude, there are 2 coyotes, possibly a third, that frequent Belvidere, accessing the island by San Rafael Ave. These coyotes have been confrontational with some dogs under certain circumstances, but are fearful of humans and not a threat to public safety. We believe that Belvidere can address the concerns of its residents through our proposed recommendations, and we look forward to helping the city and its citizens in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Do you have questions for Ms. Dimitrick from council?
We have a coyote hotline available, and I wanted to announce that. It's a local phone number, 415-435-8942. And you're able to call that number. And if it's an emergency, you'd be instructed to hang up and dial 911. If it's a non-emergency call, we'd love to have our residents leave a message about any sightings or encounters that they, if they happen to see any more coyotes around. So, and then Rebecca, I know we visited some vacant homes and that was a concern.
Yes, if that went with, looking around houses or vacant lots for places that could provide harborage for mesopredators, including raccoons, opossums, fox, coyote, and taking steps to make sure that those are addressed. And also brush clearing is on those vacant lots would be helpful too.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. You showed there with the data that there's been a decrease in sightings over the last few months. Can you explain why that likely is?
Yes, thanks for that question. It could be that it is springtime, and if this is a mated pair and they have pups, either in Tiburon, probably, they're paying attention there, staying close to their natal den. And also, you've done a great job educating folks. Perhaps there are more people paying attention to not feeding, not leaving stuff out. The sightings have gone down also because wasn't there, I think there was 2 weeks where nobody saw a coyote here and I couldn't find them for the life of me or Angus. And I think that they do tend to stay over in Tiburon and come visit here. Whether they stay the night here or not, I don't know yet. And that's where your hotline is really going to help. There is limited data. So this is going to help kind of flesh out that profile so we can understand what these coyotes are, who they are.
So if it is because they've had pups, when does that effect sort of wear off, and when would we see an increase again potentially?
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mention also that it's the most lush time of the year. There's plentiful water and resources, so they don't have to travel as far. The pups are probably about 8 to 12 weeks old right now, and at about 12 weeks, they can start migrating to what is called rendezvous sites. So instead of being at the natal den, they actually are stashed away in places where the parents feel they'll be safe throughout the day or evening. They may migrate over here, but last year there were no sightings that I know of Sheltie-sized dogs, pups. So I don't even know that the coyotes ever brought their pups to Belvedere last year, if they had them. Did that answer your question?
Perfectly, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I do have just a couple quick ones. You said that you had seen some evidence of feeding, and then one of the photos that was on looked to be of a gentleman feeding, and there was like a green arrow. Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, was a person feeding gulls at the Woodlands
Oh,
Market,
okay.
and the trash down there in the wee hours of the morning on Monday morning was pretty significant.
But you didn't, and you mentioned overflowing trash bins. I think you said at TPC as well. But did you check TPC for sightings, or was that just outside of the territory that you were focused on?
Thank you. It was outside of the territory. I didn't spend much time there.
And you didn't see any sightings, or it doesn't appear to me that the data or the graphic around reported sightings that you had to rely upon showed much activity down at the boardwalk where those overflowing trash bins were.
By TPC or the Woodlands Market?
Yeah, the Woodlands Market, yes.
Yeah, the sightings I was going off of was what was reported since October when you guys did a great job getting people starting to report what they're seeing out there. And so that's what those sightings were based on. And again, your hotline and encouraging people, even if they have historical sightings to share, that would be very, very helpful.
Thank you. And one last question. We had read, I think you may had mentioned in some of your work, concern around construction sites possibly being a hot spot for inadvertent feeding where the crew may leave some leftover food in an open bin. Did you see any evidence of that or correlating sightings with construction sites or anything?
Yes, again, the sightings are kind of weak and we don't have enough of it, but yes, at one construction site, we didn't go on people's property, but on one construction site from the street, it was evident that there was some food scraps left and that was addressed immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry. Thanks, Rebecca. Working with you on this task force, our next steps, as you talked about, are focusing on finishing up and getting the city council to put in place a response plan, focusing on the reporting through the phone that Councilmember Cooper talked about, as well as a website reporting form, which is also available. Update the website to have this information, training city first responders, and working on an attractants inventory around the city so we can try to keep an eye on that going forward. What are we missing? That's a big question, what I'm saying. I don't mean to throw it at you, but what are we missing on that list?
No, it's great. I can tell you one of the failures is when municipalities rely only on their citizens for what we call aversion conditioning or humane hazing. It's important to have skilled people, myself and the folks that maybe I train, is to understand, what are you seeing? What is that coyote doing? What is it trying to tell you? What's behind it? It's not the animal, it's what's causing that animal to behave that way. And that's why removing animals doesn't work. You have to go to what caused it, whether that's trash or they can be reactive when they're chased by loose dogs. The coyotes can become reactive and defensive. So I'm hoping to stay with you guys longer and help your first responders learn this behavior, how to analyze the reports that come in. And then whether it's your first responders who go out and do the humane hazing when appropriate, they'll start learning when to do it. And that's where you'll be most effective, is if you have a team of people, whether it's your first responders or potentially the block captains, going out at first under my direction to help them understand when they should apply pressure, because sometimes hazing is not necessary or required or shouldn't be done.
And you're also helping us with some quasi-permanent monitoring, video cameras, stuff, things like that.
Yes, I hope so too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from council. Thank you, Ms. Dimitri. Really appreciate it. It was an excellent report. Let me open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to address this item? Yes, Ms. Pauls, come on up. You can tell us your name and your address, please.
Tracy Paul, I live at 108 Golden Gate. Rebecca, I just have a few, I know we chatted. So I have a few questions. First is, one person stopped me on the street. I asked her to please call the police department, and another individual emailed me and said they know for a fact there are dens here. So what should we do? It feels like hearsay, but it doesn't feel like hearsay when they're telling me they're like, this person's like, here is my address. There are 2 dens behind my house. They are not being looked at. And I'm like, I'm not the coyote expert. We need to so I feel like there's maybe just a smidge more. These seem really specific that they're giving me. So maybe a smidge more that we could go and look at those. Okay, great. That's number 1. And number 2, Peter, you and Jane, and we've chatted about this. It feels like things have calmed down. When and what do we want to do when it gets insane again? Because relying on everyone to call in, if that's going to be our number one, it sounds like we're putting a lot of things in place, but are we going to bring someone in when the streets are running with coyotes? Because they're not right now, but they were. I mean, we could have showed her 200 coyotes if she had been here when we had that meeting, but right now it's great that we can't find one. So I want to encourage us to be prepared for, instead of having to need days and weeks to figure out what we wanted. Days is fine. Months. It's not fine. You know what I'm saying? Right. Because I think that will be a challenging situation again that we'll find ourselves in.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, it sounds like we'll be able to take the information that you have, Tracy, and follow up with the specific sightings that you're concerned about, presumably with Rebecca's help.
Yeah, I mean,
and
specifically den addresses. I was given one on a walk. I asked them to call the police department, and I was just given another one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, great.
Yep, let's get that information.
Great.
We'll follow up. And I think the whole point of this additional work, including the work that Vice Mayor Mark referred to, including the action plan, the inventory of attractants and so forth, and the training that may take place with respect to first responders, all is directed towards reducing any further influx of coyotes on a seasonal basis or whatever, but also teaching and enabling neighbors and our community staff and first responders how best to manage it. So all of this is directed towards preparing for the next time this might happen again.
I know. I wish she was here in February.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have anyone else who wishes to address this agenda item who's here in the room? Seeing none, let me ask if there's anyone online.
We have Jason Zintak.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey there. This is Jason at 12 Britain. I know Rebecca visited our home with my wife, Claire, and our dog was attacked in December. And then we also took pictures of coyote in the backyard in March. She walked the property. We believe the den or dens is just over our fence line in a sloping backyard. But Rebecca, I don't think you were able to investigate because of the fence. However, I think it's still possible there's activity there, given we hear it quite often. So wondering if there's an appropriate follow-up.
I think, thank you, Jason. I think we'll add you to the list of addresses that we're going to do our best to follow up on, presumably with Rebecca's help. Anything else you would like to address? Sounds like he may have dropped the call. All right.
That sounds good.
Oh, very well. Thank you. Thanks for the call. Thanks for participating. Anyone else online with their hand raised?
Yes, we have Mr. Rothman.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was a little confused by something that the expert discussed. I think she said that there is not a natal den in Belvedere, or if there is a natal den, there's only one natal den. And yet, several people have described what they think are dens. Is there some sort of difference between a natal den and another den, so that maybe there are more coyotes in the other dens than in the natal dens? If some clarification could be given. In addition, the expert mentioned that she saw construction sites but didn't go on them, and that's reasonable. Most construction sites have a fence around them, and so you really can't see what's happening in the construction site. And there are workers who have their lunch there, and they may very well leave scraps of food around. I would like to suggest that when the building department is examining sites for how progress is coming, when they're signing off on things, plumbing, whatever it is, that they also look around to be sure that there's no food being left around. And if there is, then they advise the contractor to have a bin to put the food in, and they could get from Mill Valley Refuse, they could simply have bins that we all have, and to put the trash in there. And so I hope that that will be considered by the city to direct the building inspectors and planning people to check the construction sites in that way when they're there for other purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rothman. I'm going to ask Ms. Dimitri to address. I want to collect all the questions that we may have for you and ask you to come up at the end. So, Ms. Hayner, can I ask if there are any other questions online?
There are no other hands raised.
Very well. So, Ms. Dimitri, could I ask you to come up and address the one pending question from Mr. Rothman about, Dr. Rothman, about the difference between a den and a natal den?
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is why it's important to know if it's a mated pair. Coyotes are fiercely territorial. And the reason why, there's a couple reasons why I don't believe there was a den here last year is nobody saw the pups. This year, I don't believe so because of the behavior of the animals. They're not acting defensive or protective of any one certain area. I had cameras up. I was walking and walking, trying to find them, trying to get them to come out. And I think there was maybe a week to 2 weeks that they were, it seemed like they were absent from here altogether. So that leads me to believe that there is no natal den here. Natal den is where the pups are born. They only use that between 8 to 12 weeks. After the pups are that age that they can travel, they'll actually leave the natal den to go to rendezvous sites, which are those protected places I mentioned. So because coyotes are so fiercely territorial and Belvedere isn't that big, you don't have enough space to have more than one mated pair. So that's why. Does that answer it?
Well, let me make sure I understand.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're saying the two coyotes that you saw may not be a mated pair because you didn't see evidence of a natal den, but if they are not a mated pair, they could be denning in Belvedere separately?
No, they would not. I'm sorry. Thank you for that. The two that I saw, I don't believe have pups this year. They could be a new couple, if you will, and they may not have pups this year, or they could have pups in Tiburon and they're coming over here to get the rats every once in a while, coming over here to explore it. Or perhaps this is not their territory. That's why you're hearing a lot of the howling going on. Maybe they're trying to stake out Belvedere as their territory, trying it out, or maybe they're signaling to others that stay out. This is kind of our home range, but it's not really it's complicated. Coyotes are really complicated. And that's why we need these data points, this information that you're going to request from the citizens, so that we can piece together this profile more and have more accurate answers for you. But they don't have pups here right now. I'm pretty darn sure. I would love to go look at those places for you, and I will.
Can you describe the, which most everyone has heard, the frenzied, seemingly, cackling, yelling at night, howling? What's going on there as best as you can describe?
Okay, yeah, their coyote is also called the song dog, and they sing. So when it sounds like there's 12 of them, there's probably 2. It's called a bow jest effect, and it's how that they make these multiple sounds, and it travels through the environment, and that's why it just sounds like a lot of them. It is not a kill. People mistaken it for an animal being torn apart or them celebrating that they've killed something. No, they don't want to tell everybody that they've just made a kill, so they're pretty quiet when that happens. So it's not that. Coyotes do not hunt in packs. So when you're hearing a couple of these, they may be communicating over to to Tiburon from Belvedere, or they could be just singing. They sing.
Rebecca, could you possibly describe, I know I was very confused by this and asked you multiple times. So you were very patient, and I'm hoping you can describe, is there such a thing as a den that is not a natal den?
No.
There is no such thing as a den.
No.
So if there's not a natal den, which is, you described to me as more like a cave where they dig in and actually create like a home, then what people may be calling dens could be rendezvous sites?
They could be rendezvous sites if pups are present, but coyotes will just rest. They'll just go and find some brush where they're not going to be disturbed, and they'll just hang out. They will look for food at times of day when they're less likely to run into people. So they're usually out at night. Here I found them to be quite nocturnal, but their behavior will change, and it's up to us. They kind of mirror people's behavior. So it's up to us to make them feel unwelcomed. And I would love to do another. I know you guys are probably sick of hearing presentations on coyotes, but I'm available at any time to offer a presentation to the citizens on their behavior and what to do.
Rebecca, just so if they don't have pups, they don't go back to the same place. They'll just rest wherever they feel like resting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, really appreciate that. Appreciate the help, and thank you for that report. All right, that concludes agenda item 3A. Next up is agenda item 4, the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that the city council considers to be routine or council has discussed previously and do not require further discussion. Unless any item is specifically removed by any member of the city council, the consent calendar will be adopted by one motion. Let me open up this agenda item for public comment. Well, for public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to address any of the items on the consent calendar? I'm seeing none in this room. Is there anyone online?
We have Mr. Rothman.
All right, go ahead.
I would like 5A to be discussed. That's identified as the individual consent item. I don't know what the difference is between an individual consent item and the consent items, but that's the one I would like to discuss.
Thank you, Dr. Rothman. That is not part of the agenda item 4 consent calendar, so we will not move it off at that request. Is there anyone on council who would like to remove any agenda items on the consent calendar?
I was not in attendance for the April meeting. I'm just not sure how you deal with that.
We can take the vote that notes your absence.
Thanks.
Similarly, please note the same for me with regard to March 13th. Otherwise, my vote will include everything but that.
Very well. Anyone else like to make any comments on the consent calendar?
I can make a motion to
Thank you.
approve the consent calendar, noting the absences.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's move to agenda item 5. A motion to approve the resolution for 2023-13, amending the current fiscal year budget to include funds to complete the Belvedere seismic upgrade project, Phase 1 environmental impact report. And do we have a staff report?
Mayor Lynch, for this item, we do not have a staff report. However, I'm happy to give an update or a brief update if that's requested.
Let's see if there's any questions from council about this item. All right, Councilmember Wilkinson.
Robert, can you just tell us in total, how much has the city spent today on not just the EIL, but the Protect Belvedere project? And how much of that came from grant funding?
Sure. Our grant for this project was about 1.1 million. And of that, the city participated in about 50% of that. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. We've spent approximately 650,000, which included the city's contribution to the grant effort and then the EIR work as well.
And the second question I have, which I know we asked in the retreat, but I wanted to confirm, the expected shelf life, if we do complete the EIR, how long would that be good for?
Yeah, that's a good question. The expected shelf life of an EIR really is dependent on the existing condition factors in the environment where the EIR was done. So for this project, assuming that we don't have new earthquakes, or assuming we don't have any other physical conditions that change as part of our levees, that EIR would be shelved and would probably be good for a number of years before we'd have to reanalyze it and more or less breathe some new life into it.
And my final question, would it allow, if at some point in the future, residents decided to move forward with, for example, one levee before the other, would it allow only part of that seismic work to be done, or is it a sort of, you have to complete all of the project?
The document, the way it's been presented, it's a single project. However, I don't think it would be much effort to amend the documents. That could be a phased project if needed.
Okay, and I'm sorry, one more question, because
Sure.
I want to make sure I have everything. We are still in line for some grants, as I understand, and we still don't have any information on that. If we were to not complete the EIR, what would be the consequence for those potential grants?
So the grants do assume that we have more or less a shovel-ready project. And part of that is having an EIR that's been certified. So if we want to still be eligible for those grants, the several millions of dollars that we've applied for, we will need to complete the EIR.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Vice Mayor Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Zenik. What can you describe what the completion timeline of this EIR would look like?
So this is the phase 1 Belvedere seismic upgrade project. There is a phase 2 that would come at a later date should the city decide to move forward with that. This additional effort is somewhere between 2 to 3 months. And the work involves responding to the comments that we received way back in November, and modifying the report as needed to address those comments, summarizing those, and then returning to council after a public notice of a hearing has been scheduled.
Any other questions on this agenda item? Yes.
I had one. I wonder because I'm always thinking about the housing element. So I wondered if, given the location of the Beach Road area and the section that's being looked at under the EIR for phase 1, do you think it would be possible to use the EIR, should it be completed, that's all along Beach Road, and be able to help us with Teal Road and Barn Road and Beach Road, that area in there where we actually have quite a few sites there listed? And I didn't know if there was a certain number of feet, like would it go for 1,000 feet or 500 feet or whatever around I'm unclear exactly, but I know, as I recall, it was a larger area. It wasn't just.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, it would be very attractive to finish it if it's something that we could use for multiple purposes.
Yeah, that's a good idea and good question. I think that generally an EIR is really specific to the project that it's covering. Really, an EIR is looking at a lot of the impacts, what the potential impacts are going to be.
Mhm.
So for a project that would be, for example, installing sheet piles, we'd be thinking about noise and vibration. We'd be analyzing those impacts related to that project. That said, there are a lot of, the sites analysis, maybe some of the mapping and other things that are really just generally items that have to go
Right.
into every EIR. Yeah, there
Yeah.
may be some overlap there.
And I would imagine if they did any traffic or whatever, that would all be the same. That wouldn't change.
Yeah, I would think that they'd most likely be referencing this EIR document for doing another
Right.
one. Yeah.
Is there any, if we didn't finish this, it sounds like we're 5/6 done or very close to being finished. I just wonder what it would mean if we didn't finish it to what has already been completed.
Yeah, I think that, generally in terms of a legal argument, you never want to have an open-ended EIR that, we received comments, we went through the public hearing, but we never completed those or responded to those. Although there is no statute limitation on the amount of time that we have to receive comments and respond to them. Generally, those do become aged after time. It's better to have a packaged document that's been certified and is ready to go.
Thank you.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes,
Roselle?
please.
Robert, in relation to this EIR is for a known project, as you described to Councilmember Cooper. But if there was a emergency event or a circumstance were to happen to these two areas that are covered by the EIR, Centerville Avenue and Beach Road, if there was a failure on Beach Road, similar to what we've had a few years ago, one, would an EIR be necessary for emergency repairs? And two, would this cover it?
Yeah, it really depends on the extent of what the damage was. We saw that with the early project where we had to replace, or I should say fortify about 200 feet of the seawall. Like I said, it depends on the damage. For the agencies that were reviewing that project, because the seawall wasn't laying on its side, they said this is not an emergency. So it would really have to be, I would think, a catastrophic failure for us to qualify for an emergency exemption that they rarely give.
So in that case, if it wasn't declared an emergency repair, we would have to do an EIR to complete the repairs.
That's right, yes.
So arguably, this could cover what we consider an emergency repair, but might not be technically an emergency repair.
Yeah, by the state or some of the other, regional boards perspectives or standards that may not meet that.
Thank you.
Other questions on this agenda item?
I want to thank Councilmember Cooper and Mark for those questions, because I think that does really clarify things. And I think you're referring to the difference between an emergency and a catastrophic failure. And I think that's a very important consideration here. And also the fact that an open-ended EIR is problematic where we have received public response, public comment. And at this point in time, we have not responded to that comment. I think that's an important consideration.
And just to clarify one last question, Mr. Zadnik, this budget amendment that's proposed would provide all the funding to complete this phase 1 EIR in full in this fiscal year.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, very well. Let's open it up for public comment, please. Is there anyone here who'd like to address this agenda item? Let's see. Okay, not seeing anyone in the room then. Is there anyone online besides, let's start with Mr. Rothman if he's still there.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm troubled by the way in which this is being pursued. After the EIR was given over for study, we were told that it's ready to be reviewed by the consultants. And yet I've reviewed the warrants that were issued for the time after the EIR began. And $150,000 was paid to Stetson Engineering, even though we were told that all the engineering had been done, and that's why it was fine to send it for the EIR consultants to evaluate it. Now we have an additional $100,000 that's being set for it. And so we're up to $250,000. And it's not clear that this is going to end at this point, because we were told that it would be 2 months between the draft and the final EIR. We're now moving to the 6th month. So it sounds like the EIR people have found some of the questions that were raised to really be problematic. I just mentioned one. In the draft EIR, it said that, yes, the sheet piling driving could cause a severe damage to housing foundations. And then it blithely said, but Belvedere will pay for all those damages that might occur to private homes. Well, that just doesn't make any sense. There was no money allocated for that. At any rate, I'm sorry that so much money is going on being spent, and I'm not at all sure that there's not going to be more money asked for, because I don't think this is as simple as it's being presented as being. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Do we have other raised hands online?
We do, we have, oh, he put his hand down. So I see no other hands raised.
Alrighty, thank you. We'll close the public comment and bring it back to council for any further discussion or a motion.
Yeah, I think my questions were covered by comments and discussion, and I'm prepared to move the item.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. Let's turn now to the next agenda item, 6A, which is a preliminary review and discussion of the annual operating budget and capital improvement program for the city for fiscal year 2023-24. And can we have a staff report, please?
So good evening, Mayor Lynch and council members. This is the preliminary review of the fiscal year 23-24 budget. So to begin with some revenue highlights, the general fund revenues reflect a slight decrease of about 1.1% over the current year budget, which equals approximately $95,000. The County of Marin estimates that the fiscal year 23-24 secured property tax revenue will be 4.5% higher than the current year allocation. The budget incorporates a slightly more conservative 4.3% increase in total property tax revenues over the current year actuals, and a 5.1% increase over our current year's budget, which is approximately $306,000. Permit revenue remains steady and are anticipated to remain steady through the next fiscal year. There are no active grants at this time included in the proposed budget. We are not anticipating any new grant funds currently, but we are always looking for grant funding opportunities through our partner agencies for which we are eligible. And now for the expenditure side. From the general fund, we will continue the deferral of filling the vacant police officer position through fiscal year 23-24. Turning to future staff COLAs, their current negotiations are still underway, and we are anticipating a 3-year contract with a 10% COLA over the 3-year period. We are anticipating a slight increase in budgets for legal expense and consultants due to continuing work finalizing the housing element site plan, completing revisions to the odds program, and supporting increase in general legal tasks. The budget does incorporate $25,000 for coyote mitigation efforts to enhance awareness, education, and monitoring, and upgrading the city's website for $19,000 to enhance ease and timeliness of communication between staff and public. Also, we have a one-time retrospective payment of $77,000 to the California JPIA insurance pool, which the city was a member from 2006 to 2015. This is to cover ongoing claims during that time period. Tiburon Fire is estimating a 7.5% increase in our current contract cost this year, which reflects their current year expenditures and a $300,000 contribution to their CalPERS Employers Pension Pre-Funding Trust, but also includes a deferral of a portion of their contributions in order to keep the city's costs as stable as possible. I do want to mention at this point that to bring to your attention a recommendation made by the Finance Committee to form an ad hoc. Their purpose will be to explore possible funding options to ease the burden of the fire contract on the city's general fund. And from our capital fund, we are continuing our upgrade of the city's office technology. In fiscal year 22-23, we brought the operating systems up to date, consolidated our servers, installed on-site data backup, and replaced staff computers that were no longer under warranty or able to be updated. This year, we are planning to update half of the staff's monitors to help complete the technology upgrade. Capital project highlights for next fiscal year include continued road improvements, Lagoon Road flood mitigation and pedestrian improvements, vegetation reduction at various locations throughout the city to assist with coyotes and fire fuel reduction, and City Hall safety improvements along San Rafael Avenue, to just name a few. Some of these projects will be funded with partner agency allocated funds and/or donations. Also, we will be continuing the deferral of the Lanes Initiative for this coming budget year. And this next slide shows the cash flow impacts of our unfunded accrued liability payment and our debt service payments. The annual debt service payment for the leaseback debt issued in 2020 is shown in orange. The unfunded accrued liability payments are shown in blue. And the fiscal year 24 payment to CalPERS, which is the one that appears to not be there because it is just $7,000, is based on the most recent valuation report from June of 21. CalPERS investment returns were 21.3 for that year, and our plans were almost 100% funded, resulting in the low UAL payment for 23-24. However, CalPERS is anticipating a negative 7.5% return for the year ending 6/30 of 22. The numbers in the valuation report will reflect this substantial decrease in investment returns with the valuation report from June of 22 that will come out in July. CalPERS is also estimating a negative 1% return for the year ending 6/30 of 23. The volatile investment environment combined with the 6.8 discount rate will significantly increase the city's unfunded accrued liability in these outer years. The projection years are fiscal year 25 to 28. The fiscal year 23-24 budget continues the city's $300,000 contribution to the Section 115 trust over the next 5 years. And on to our anticipated transfers that we are including as part of the budget. We have a little over $1 million to the fire fund, the equipment replacement funds around $34,000, the 115 pension funds $300,000, Capital projects is 259,000. The road impact fee fund is slightly over 115,000. The pension debt obligation is just over 240,000. And the insurance and legal reserve, we are planning to have 200,000 to cover legal expenses that are outside of our insured risk. And now here is a summary of the general fund's budget, which anticipates total revenues of about 8.5 million and total expenditures of just under 6.7 million and transfers out of almost 2.2 million. And although the table shows an ending deficit balance of 375,000, the ongoing operating revenues do exceed our ongoing operating expenses, which will be shown in the next slide. And just to note that the capital and equipment projects will draw from prior year excess fund balance, which will be rolled over after the close of the fiscal year. And here we have the general fund operating revenue and expenditures and a surplus of 33,000. As I mentioned, the capital and equipment projects will draw from prior year excess fund balances that will be rolled over and will offset those transfers shown in the previous slides. We are estimating approximately 728,000 in carryover from fiscal year 23 to 24 for the capital projects. And this brings us to our general fund reserve. The reserve policy is to maintain a reserve equal to 50% of the projected general fund expense plus fire transfer plus the pension debt service. This budget incorporates the policy with the reserve goal at 50% of the fiscal year 24-25's projected general fund expense plus fire transfer plus debt service, which is approximately 4.1 million. The projected general fund balance at the end of next fiscal year is just under 4.43 million. And therefore, the projected general fund balance is over the policy goal by 335,000 or 54%. And this next slide shows the history of our general fund's actual ending fund balance, the fiscal year 22-23 estimated general fund balance of 4.8 million, and it shows the 5-year projections. The green line reflects the council's reserve policy goal. And as you can see, the budget reflects a balanced budget for the next 5 years, as well as meeting the reserve goal. So in summary, just a few highlights. The general fund reserve policy is met over the 5-year forecast period. We continue with a contribution to our 115 pension trust fund, and we continue to provide a balanced budget with a fiscally conservative approach. So what are our next steps? First of all, we are asking for your input today, and we'll take your suggestions into consideration while we continue to refine our budget projections. And we'll bring the budget back to council for adoption on June 12th after we conduct the public hearing. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that report, Ms. Cutter. Any questions at this time?
I have one, and I just wanted to report to council that I spoke with Ms. Cotter earlier today about my one concern. Looking at pages 8, 12, and 22, I'm hoping that when this is returned to us in June, we can have a little bit more explanation of the cost recovery program that we put into place about a year ago, I guess. And I think it would be helpful to show how the city has worked hard and is continuing to work hard at reducing the perceived deficit in the planning department, which has been in part remedied by the cost recovery program. And I found it difficult to suss out from the budget exactly how and what amount that deficit, that expense is actually much, much less than it appears in the document. So we'll get additional explanation in June. Thank you very much, Ms. Cotter.
Thank you. And I will bring that back in June.
Thank you. Do we have other questions or comments at this time? Yes.
If you don't mind, I wanted, well, firstly to thank Helga for all of this incredible work and the Finance Committee for all of the work that they did. I wanted, if possible, just to provide a bit more context around the recommendation from the Finance Committee to establish a ad hoc within finance to look at the pressure that our fire costs are imposing on our budget. And so just to provide a little bit of context, historically, most of our fire expense was picked up through the fire tax, but over time that tax hasn't accelerated by as much as the cost of the actual our fire service from Tiburon Fire Protection District. And as a consequence, we're picking up an increasingly large share through the general budget. And so just to put some sort of context around those numbers, 20 years ago when the fire tax was last increased, the fire tax covered about 84%, I think it was, of fire expenditures, and now it covers less than 50%. And so in money terms, that means we're spending about $700,000 a year more from the general budget than we were 20 years ago. And $700,000 can fund a lot of police officers that we are having to defer at the moment. And so I think the Finance Committee felt that the combination of pressure from our fire expenditures and from pensions meant that we need to right the ship a little bit, or we certainly wanted to consider that. And so therefore, with the fire measure scheduled to renew next March, I think it is, that we should do some work to see, just to explore around that issue a little bit further.
Thank you, Council Member Wilkinson. Can I ask you just to explain, as you're providing the context around this for anyone who's listening, why it is that the revenue from the fire tax has not grown at the rate as the expenditures to the Fire Protection District?
Sure. So the Fire Protection District just passes on to us essentially the growth in their budget in accordance with the number of properties we have here versus the number of properties in Tiburon. And so we pick up about 21% of their budget, which otherwise grows in line with Tiburon property tax revenues. So that's growing at 7% a year on average, whereas our fire tax is only pegged to increase. It's a flat parcel tax per property, and it is only pegged to increase by the rate of inflation. And so we're only seeing 2 or 3% increase in that versus the 7 or so on the other side. And so over a period of 20 years, that's a very big gap. And so in terms of the longer term history, we first contracted with Tiburon Fire Protection District in 1980, and we increased the fire tax in 2000 because of the gap that had grown by that period, and we haven't had another increase in 23 years.
Terrific. Thank you. Very helpful. Any other questions or comments right now from Ms. Cotter?
Just a quick question. Aside from the gap in the fire tax revenue versus the service provided by Tiburon, and perhaps the property tax revenue escalations that are somewhat less than expected in this last year or so, what concerns do you have, or where are the softest dollars in this budget? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where are you less secure with these numbers?
Probably like in the planning, we saw the planning numbers are less this year than last year. So in planning fees, probably that's the biggest area for me right now. And grant funds, we don't have any grant funds.
Thank you.
I'm going to add to that on a medium-term basis, which is that one of the biggest risks is uncertainty around pensions, because those very large numbers that are projected in the outer years right now could change significantly depending on the performance of CalPERS over the next couple of years. So the next 2 years are sort of locked in, but if CalPERS suddenly has a 20% return in 1 year, then that changes everything again for a few years.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Cotter at this time? All right, well, let's open it up for public comment. Is there anyone here in chambers who would like to address this agenda item? Not seeing anyone. Do we have anyone online with their hand raised?
There are no hands raised.
All right. We'll close the public comment then. We'll bring it back. There's no vote to take tonight. It's direction in advance of our June meeting and public hearing on this topic. But is there any other direction anyone would like to provide before we move on to the next agenda item?
Could I, are you asking of council?
Yes, please.
Yes, Ms. Cotter, in the next month, if you could just take a look at account numbers 5015, the IT ends up being over $100,000. I know it's split between the various departments, but I think it would be helpful to take a look at that and perhaps give us a little more explanation, just to make sure that those are discrete expenses. And also, I was just wondering about account number 6170 with regard to the conferences, meetings, and trainings. And it also does add up quite a bit over the various departments. And it looked like the current years did not come close to the projected balance, and yet projected as the estimates, and that the estimates were used in place of the actuals. So it did seem to add up quite a bit more than what was actually spent. So I just thought it might be worth taking a closer look at that.
I can take a look, and just, since with COVID and coming back, staff wasn't able to maybe go as to many conferences as they had previously. So I can take a look at that and report back.
Thank you.
Can I once again just thank Helga? This is for our one-person finance department. This is just a lot of work that we do every year. And so it's a huge lift, and you have a lot else going on. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to echo that thanks, and I also want to thank the Finance Committee and Council Member Wilkinson, who serves on that, and Vice Mayor Mark. Yes, so thank you to you both. I know it's an extraordinary amount of work, and thank you, Ms. Cotter.
Thank you.
All right, we'll close that agenda item and move on to 6B, which is continued review of the proposed draft construction time limit ordinance. I know there's a staff report on this from Mr. Van Son.
Mayor Lynch, fellow council members, tonight again, we have a review of the proposed CTL amendment. We brought this code amendment to council last month, and council provided staff with direction that included asking staff to provide the fiscal differences between the proposed policy or the proposed code and the existing code. Council also asked me to review the landscape extension and make sure that was people were able to apply for that as well. We had questions about certificate of occupancies or temporary certificate of occupancies, as well as changes to the administrative policy manual. While revising or researching all of those questions and concerns, I also had a couple of council members come to me and express that they would like an exception for an appeal, or a way for the applicant to come to city council and plead their case to not pay to extend the permit. All of those concerns have been addressed in the newly revised APM policies 14.4, 14.5. The landscape extension was left in BMC or Belvedere Municipal Code section 20.04.035. It is a carryover from the current system we have now. And then again, with the attachments to the staff report, we have gone and provided a comparison of the fiscal differences. And then again, the C of O issues were addressed in the APM revisions. Staff recommends that council consider these revisions and direct staff to present this as a first reading at next month's council meeting. Or if council has concerns, staff would be happy to make any revisions or amendments council wants. And we are open for questions.
Thank you. We have questions for Mr. Vanson at this time.
Unfortunately, I didn't see, some of these pages weren't really listed, so it's hard to me to refer. But I know there was listed an exception. And it said something about under certain circumstances. And I know that a few examples were given, but I wonder if it's still a little too loose for that, you know, that we don't give more examples, or if it has to do with, oh, here it is.
It's in the attachment.
All
to-
in red.
Yes, that's all the revisions that were
Right.
made from the last council meeting.
Right. And it says unanticipated discovery of historical, archaeological resources, geologic issues, and other similar conditions. Are they all essentially archaeological or geological that are considered there?
There may be other conditions. The point was to allow the applicant to have their appeal process and not to list everything that we would consider under the appeal. That list would be extensive
No,
and
I,
obviously wouldn't fit in
Right.
the body of the code there. But we wanted to give a couple examples of what we would allow.
okay,
And it's similar situations, but there are extenuating circumstances that would go beyond what is listed in the body of the code.
well, I get your point that it would be hard to list them all. It just,
We can provide.
I'm sure someone will
some
try
other
to think of
specifics
something
as well.
that's not on the list.
Of course, everyone will.
Right.
Everyone will, you know, it's their right to have the appeal,
Right,
so
right,
it
of
is their
course.
right to file for it.
Okay.
But again, we didn't want to get into
A
just
huge-
an
right,
itemized
right,
list of these are the only criteria.
And Councilmember Cooper, I think part of the intent there is by having a distinct and specific list actually provides less flexibility for the, in this case, the review committee currently, or the extension committee, or Brian or his successor to provide it. We try to identify the category of items. I mean, clearly items that are outside the control. I mean, even in our most recent experiences, it's hard to identify what is out of the control. If you list, you know, A through F, which we do currently in our code, it limits the committee what they can and should provide. That still comes to the council, you know, for appeal. This was our thinking, is to provide a broader category of items with the caveat that they're out beyond the control of the applicant and unanticipated or not foreseen at the time of the application.
But weather wouldn't be included in that, or that wouldn't be,
Well, weather, you know, we have variable weather here.
right, exactly.
It's not designed to be a reason to extend a permit
Correct.
unless it's a natural disaster of some sort. And don't forget, this ordinance would be surpassed by any state
Right. okay.
ordinance that the city would then follow up as an urgency measure to extend or invalidate any sort of expiration.
Additionally, for something catastrophic,
Yeah.
the federal government or the state government would
that-
also step in, kind of like COVID, and provide the extension themselves instead of leaving it up to the local body.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
So can I want to,
Yeah.
what about as another example of, you know, we just had a CTL appeal where the contractor was sick.
Mhm.
Where does that fall?
I think that falls under other similar conditions not reasonably anticipated at the time of the project, whether it's, it can even be city actions. A permit is or a project is changed and altered, and there's a 6-week review period that, is causing some delays in the project. They'll come to Brian and say, we applied for this, the change in the project. I mean, there's some subjectivity there because we don't want to extend projects unnecessarily if the applicant keeps changing their minds. But if there's a circumstance that the applicant has had a injury and wants an elevator put in the project, for example, that might take 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it might be, to go through plan check and get that building permit reissued to incorporate that. That time should be credited to the applicant in some fashion. And this description gives that building official that discretion to do it. And if that official determines it's not viable within the definition of this, the applicant has the right to appeal this. They can continue work. There's no penalty. There's no need to stop the work during the time, arguably maybe 1 or 2 months before it gets agendized on a city council meeting. And we hear it much like we did for the few most recent ones, whether it's a sewer lateral that has an easement problem or the health of a contractor.
Because one of my concerns when I was sort of thinking this through more, one of the proposed benefits of this new model is that it will potentially reduce the administrative burden on staff by not having this big appeal at the end. But I think we'd have to, if we choose to move ahead with this, we'd really have to check in again to see whether actually it's increased the administrative burden, because people are coming not just once at the end, now they're coming 3 times every time they're looking to re-up their permit. And so it might end up reducing the burden. I'm not convinced that it will, and that will just be experience that will, and the strength of personality of our building, of our building department. So it's just something to think about. I don't have a solution, because it isn't, I agree with you, you can't strictly define the undefinable. And so it's a tricky part of this.
Another attempt was to have the discussion at the time when it's most relevant, as opposed to, in some cases 3 or 4 years later. So you have an actual event that's happening, and you can, the building inspector can go out and look at it and see the actual delays and the actual, conditions that are causing the delay.
Additionally, just to follow on what Commissioner Marcus, Councilmember Mark, is saying, I don't believe you would have an appeal every time, because once the initial appeal was heard and denied, if it was denied, we wouldn't hear it again.
Oh,
We had
another
already
reason.
denied- Huh?
They'll find another reason.
Be that again, that is the right,
Right.
but it wouldn't be the same appeal over and over again. If they would have, normally there's one reason, the sanitary lateral, health of a contractor, something like that. It wouldn't be numerous reasons. All those reasons would be presented at the initial appeal. And if denied, they wouldn't come back, and we wouldn't hear the same appeal over again for the next 6 months or 8 months or whatever the extension timeframe was at that point.
Since you're talking about unanticipated, would it be a problem to add an other similar unusual condition, so that it sort of gives it a little bit more defined, rather than just other similar conditions, that you're trying to emphasize the word?
Or just replace similar with unusual.
Right.
Because similar references, it can reference the geological stuff, which doesn't.
Right. Which it doesn't need to. Okay.
Can I just ask for a reminder from Vice Mayor Mark, because we've talked about this a bit on the Construction Impact Committee and this proposal in particular. My recollection from the current appeals language, you said there was A through F, but I recall some enumeration of things that generally were considered not to be unusual. I always found that to be somewhat helpful, because it gives, we could enumerate some things that are considered to be unusual and might be unanticipated and the basis for an appeal. And then a list of things that are considered to be not unusual. Bad weather, generally considered not unusual. A 100-year, rainstorm and flood maybe would be considered, but I wonder, what was their consideration in these revisions of leaving in that list of things that were not considered unusual?
No, but very good point. Just trying to find it, but I don't know if I will be able to.
There are two separate sections of the current code. One allows findings for an extension, and one dictates what shall not be used as an appeal. I believe what you're referring to is the appeal of the CTL penalty. So it's different than the 7 or 8 items listed under the CTL extension, where that's where the archaeological, topographic, other things like that are listed as acceptable reasons to extend the permit. What you are referring to is language that is not acceptable to reduce the penalty on appeal. And we can carry that similar language over if council should wish.
I think it's worth considering that before we bring it back in June. And I say that simply because what we're trying to do is move the appeal process from the very end, where there's an appeal of a penalty that's been assessed, and move it to the front end, where the homeowner is trying to get their project going again and trying to not have to pay a premium to extend the permit. And I think those factors, a list of what is unusual and a list of what is generally considered not unusual, would both apply under this new framework where we're looking at, reducing, a premium to be paid, but we're doing it on the front end.
Understood. Yes, sir.
Brian, can I just ask a quick question, which is, of all the medium, large size projects that currently take place in Belvedere, what share of them actually currently run into CTL fines?
So there are quite a few that run into CTL issues. I wouldn't necessarily call them fines, because a lot of times what will happen is they'll properly apply for the extension, and the extension committee will grant them some relief. A majority of projects will finish within that initial time frame. In my time here, I believe there are no more than being just a little, I don't want to say conservative, but there's probably only 6 or 8 projects that have, in my 6 years here, that we have levied large fines to. The first of which, I was only here about 2 months and the project had gone long before I was here. And I was just the person that levied the fine at the time. We have a couple others, 2 we just heard recently. And we had a couple others prior to that, but those are really the only projects in my 6 years here that we have seen accrue these large amounts of fines. Other ones we have heard, but they are minor fines, under $50,000 for the most part. So they have not gone much longer than the extended time if granted the extension. A lot of those were not granted the extension, so they were fined $20,000 or $30,000 because they were only a couple of weeks over. So not many. I would say for the large fines, 98% of the projects do not get to that point. But in terms of extensions, there would probably be, including smaller ministerial permits like water heaters and things like that, I would say only 20 or 25% go beyond their CTL.
Thank you.
One follow-up to that. And would you say, given what you just what you just reported, would you say that the notice, the 30-day grace period, is effective to encouraging projects close to the CTL to wrap it up more quickly? Does that help to alert people that they may be in a default situation?
I wouldn't classify it as effective in terms of like a penalty in making people hurry up, but I am a firm believer that it does help the property owner and the contractor. We're alerting them. There's really no harm. It's a simple letter that we produce. We send it out 30 days before, and it's a courtesy that the city provides to let you know that we basically have gone into this agreement with the issuance of the building permit and this agreement's about to expire. And we are providing you a month leeway on this. So effective in terms of getting the project finished, I would say no, but effective in terms of transparency and trying to help the project out, I would say it's very effective, yes.
On that point, and I'm not sure if this is the right time for us to sort of wordsmith these edits in advance of presenting them again for a first reading in June. It may be that we want to identify as many as we can and then work offline with a small team, 1 or 2 council members. But on this notice point that you're talking about, I'm thinking about another recent appeal that we had from the Bauer residents where the 30-day notice got held up, by the State Department and so forth. And there was discussion which is an unusual circumstance. But there was discussion from the council who represented them here saying, could we put email in there? I mean, the code right now says it'll go out by registered letter or something like that. And could we just have, or other means of available electronic communications, including email, a text message or something like that. And so it's a kind of a minor point, but it's one that I think could be important, may have avoided that last appeal that we had. And there may be others in here that are worth scrubbing on between now and the June meeting.
We can 100% do that. And to be totally honest, the code requires a bare minimum we have to do for notification. So if we would just like to add on putting an email in, I don't think we need to amend anything. We would just change staff, procedure for the most part. And when we produce the letter and mail it out as required by the municipal code, we would just also attach it as a PDF to the email we have on file and send it out.
Yeah, I think that's good. And what I'm trying to think about is, when we make these code revisions, we look way down the road. And I'm imagining a scenario when none of us are involved in this government and someone else is sitting in your chair and they pull up the code and this is, what do I have to do? And it says, send a letter, and if it says send a letter or one of the following, electronic forms of outreach. I'm just saying, I don't want to wordsmith that tonight. I'm saying, but I think there's little things in here that we should run through and look back on the appeals that we've had, in your experience and experience that we can get anecdotally, and see if there's other little tightening up that we can do to see how we can anticipate, because, you identify it as a courtesy, and I suppose it is, but we're in the customer service business. And so everything we should do, is directed to helping our residents get their projects done on time without having to pay a premium. And so whatever we can bake into language in our code that's helpful to that is something we should at least consider, I think.
So the one issue with that, or 2 issues that I can think of right off the top of my head, and I'll defer to Andrew, we would change our enforcement code, which is not presented here. And additionally, I do not know if email is a proper way of identifying or notifying someone of like a code enforcement issue or something like that. It's certified mail, it's posting on the job site. There's very specifics on how to notify someone. And I do not know if email is one of them. But if we just change kind of the procedure, even in 20 years, if someone comes in, I'm no longer here, none of us are no longer here, we'll have a procedure set in place just by historical actions that send an email out without having be written in code or codified.
So that's good. And that's the kind of debate I think we can run to ground, between now and June.
I just had one. Oh, Peter, did you want to talk about that?
No, just real quick. I'd even go a step further and try to figure out a way to get some sort of confirmed receipt of notification. Right? I mean, it's to eliminate the issue. However, that notification is delivered. You just have some sort of confirmation of receipt.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I was speaking with city attorney.
No, I would just say, I would go a bit further and we can talk about it offline, but however that communication happens, just getting some sort of confirmation of receipt, confirmation of that the contractor and or the homeowner has received the notification.
Understood. So the
certified mail attempts to do, but in the
Yes.
case we just recently saw, it didn't happen.
And in the specific case, which we referenced earlier, it was posted on site and then taken down.
Yeah.
So we, again, I'm not sure who took it down. We couldn't verify that. It was the real estate agent or the contractor or somebody had received that notice and they may or may not have notified the property owner at that point.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it seems to me that I mean, if we're trying to change behaviors, it's the behavior of the homeowner that has to change. And so some of these larger projects, the homeowners don't even live here, money's not really a consideration for them. And so they need to know, certainly not just the contractor, that they have their project to stop for the time being, and for them to acknowledge that receipt. Otherwise, I don't know how much this will change behaviors, because if it's just the contractor getting the notification, he just keeps billing the homeowner, they just keep paying their monthly bills, and at the end, they don't even know what is what necessarily when you're talking about these really large projects. So to me, it's that the homeowner has to be more directly involved in all of this, I would say, including understanding their fines.
Understood. Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Cooper, did you have something to add?
I just needed one clarification. It was about project final approval relative to CTL ordinance.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just didn't understand. It's just an explanation from you. At the very bottom of the page, it says that building and planning held a series of meetings. And one example of eliminating a negative effect of a construction project is when major concrete elements have been completed, no longer requiring cement trucks and pumpers at the site, takes away excessive noise, parking, traffic, etc. Taking this approach, that would be a criteria for signing off on the CTL. Am I reading that wrong?
Are you in the policy?
It's
I think it's the TCFO.
it's a fort.
It might be, I mean, which amendment, which policy you're looking at?
14.4.1.
14.4.1.
And at the bottom, there's a long paragraph about the degree to which no longer subject to construction time limits, which I read to mean that therefore this construction time limit would not come into play once cement pouring was done.
This is,
This is a carryover from the original policy, and I
Oh,
think what
okay.
it's referencing the actual meeting that they were having.
Oh,
And the
okay.
actual meeting was the degree at which point construction time limit is no longer required. So we have changed that to allow that for the TCO. So this was
Okay.
a policy that talked about what ended the CTL. In actuality, in practice, we did not follow this policy.
Okay.
Otherwise, jobs would have been signed off and CTLs would have been stopped far earlier
Right,
than
it
they
didn't make
ever were.
sense to me.
So when I read this, I interpreted it as that was the meeting that they were holding at the time, was the meeting to consider complete to the degree of which the CTL would be stopped. So I left that in there to explain that, because the meeting did happen, that's historically accurate, but it wasn't a meeting to stop everything. It was just, that was the meeting, basically the heading of the meeting. And the policy
So it
came after
doesn't
that.
mean that once the cement gets poured.
No, not
that's
at
the
all.
end
No,
of
ma'am.
CTL?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, because I know that there
And I would be
many
happy
impacts
to
in a lot of
amend that as
projects
well.
after the cement trucks have gone. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was just in reference to the overall scope of the rough frame.
Okay.
Because again, cement trucks, you'll do the foundation, you'll do the house. But cement trucks will come back at the end to pour retaining walls
Oh,
and
right.
walkways
Okay.
and things like that.
Okay.
But again, at no point was the intent to say, once the concrete
That's it.
trucks
Okay.
stop, you're done. The intent is to finish the project in whole before everything stops. And I'd be happy to amend that paragraph or remove that paragraph, should council
I'll
wish.
let you guys decide that. But
well, that paragraph is there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that
Yeah.
paragraph is there to show the process that the policy was determined.
Yes,
What
sir.
it was the evolutionary process.
Yes, sir.
And the meetings that were held among staff and what issues they discussed and where they came up with the policy. It's a comment section, and the section below
Okay.
that is the policy itself, which doesn't reflect
which doesn't.
that
right.
that circumstance. It was just what was being discussed at
Like
that
an
meeting.
example.
A finding, like how the findings were made in a sense.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, everybody, for doing this, because I was on that construction impact committee as well. And the only hope I also have is that we can move on to some of the other things, specifically the idea of putting up the information that the contractor would put up at the site.
The sign, you're referring to the sign and the
Yeah.
link? Yes.
Right. So I'm hoping we can also start maybe getting that moving forward, and it would be great. I think people would appreciate it. I know that it's very confusing to everyone on Beach Road because it's so much in the way of everything. And yet there's nothing on there. And I thought, gosh, Hadley was a part of our committee. I thought that he would have, that they would have maybe adopted that, but they obviously didn't. So we'll have to
So
try to get
Robert
them
and
to
I
do it.
have discussed that.
Oh, great.
Yep. And so we'll be moving forward with that
Thanks.
real soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
So Brian, if we move forward with this, we won't actually know its behavioral impacts for 3-4 years down the road, correct?
Yes, depending on the valuation of the project and the length of the CTL. It would, for these larger projects, we would not know until 12, 18, 24 months afterwards.
Yeah, because I mean, this is sort of an attempt to improve things, and it's not perfect, but we don't have a perfect solution. So to me, even though none of us will likely be here, I don't know whether there's a way to document that this should be reviewed on a certain, after a certain number of years, just to really check whether it's working or not, in the same way as, we're doing this regular look on cost recovery, and we go back to review that, and we can do that more regularly, whether it makes sense just to document that, so that it doesn't just sit there and we wait 20 more years and then go back and say, oops, it didn't work.
Understood. I'm sure there's some mechanism we can use to have it reviewed after, say, 2 years, because again, we would want some of the larger projects involved as well. But I can assure you that the building department consistently goes over its most commonly used policies, procedures, and things like that. We're always looking to get it right and make it better. Because that's, again, as we spoke of earlier, that we're civil servants, and that's kind of what we do is we help people out. And so we're consistently doing that, but I would have to talk with Andrew and Robert, and I'm sure we could formulate some type of mechanism to have that reviewed.
All right, let me just make a couple more comments, Brian, and we can, I've got some more, but we can talk about this offline. But the big ones are, I just want to note that our record included a communication from Mark Swanson, a local builder. We all received that by email. It was a detailed, thoughtful memo. We all read it. I want to include a consideration offline, Brian, about the sequence of approvals that we have. We identified them literally in sequence. And I want to see if there's a way to put in discretion there, because we've had construction projects where, for example, getting PG&E to come out and sign off on a project has been a gating item. And you can imagine that imparting an enormous amount of delay to a project. So we might want to think about ways that we can put discretion in there around that sequencing. Just discuss that.
Understood.
right.
Understood. Are you referring to discussion at time of the appeal or the CTL or the
No.
permit reinstatement, or are we talking at kind of like the construction pre-con meeting?
No, I'm saying between now and June, let's you and I discuss as part of the revisions for this,
Oh, yes, sir.
to consider putting language in there that allows for some discretion if the sign-offs are being held up for some unforeseen reason.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
Let's open this up for public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to discuss this item? Please.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor Lynch and council members. I don't want to confuse the time.
Mark, if you don't mind, turn the mic on there.
You hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
I'll start over again.
Can you tell us your name and? your
Yeah,
address?
name's Mark Swanson. I'm the contractor that wrote that letter last night. or
Hello,
yesterday.
Mr. Swanson. Thank you for the letter.
My pleasure. And I don't want to confuse the timekeeper. We can keep it rolling, but I'm going to introduce Beach Swanson, my 17-year-old son, who I thought it would be a good idea to introduce him to how government works. And it's the generation that hopefully turns it all around. So make no ado for Beach.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
So I just wanted to clarify. Do I need to say my name again?
No, we got you.
I just
Thank you.
wanted to clarify a point in the email that you all got in the document. So there's a lot of data and like numbers on timeframes and stuff, at least in the table that you received, and I guess in the rest of the document. But I just wanted to clarify sort of like the pathos to the problem that we're talking about here. Whereas there's a question of like fairness for people who would like to build, like start projects in Belvedere, where in neighboring towns, as you can see in the table that you were provided in the document, neighboring towns have a lot more leeway on like times on like at least weekend days or building times during the week. And so I just guess there's a question of fairness on if you would like to build a home here and you dream of building a home in Belvedere, why are you provided less time and opportunity to do that as opposed to a person who's building in neighboring towns like Tiburon? And I just guess there's a question of fairness there on why it's easier for someone to build a project of equal complexity or equal size just because you live one town over. And so that's all I wanted to clarify. Yield the rest of my time to my dad.
All right, thank you, Beach. He's showing up during the Warrior playoff game, so he gets a little something extra out of this.
You could at least tell us what the current score is for those of us that have been here all night.
Score up, Beach, for the mayor. The mayor asks you, listen.
Halftime,
Please.
right? Oh, halftime ended 68-59 Warriors. So we're up.
Thank you, Beach.
There we go.
Appreciate it.
So I thank you again for the audience and the opportunity to speak. I wrote the letter and I outlined 5 items in it that I thought were material and important to this discussion. And Beach was born in Belvedere and we lived here for 10 years and he lives in Tiburon now. And most of my work has been on the Tiburon Peninsula in both Belvedere and Tiburon. And one of the things, obviously, if we were able to work longer hours, I think it would make a lot more sense. It's almost, to me, an obvious, easy win all around because it gives us more time in the day to get work done. And I gave a table of how many hours that you can actually capture by working 2 more hours a day and on Saturday. But what I didn't do is multiply that by how many guys. If I have 10 guys on site or 8 guys or 4 guys, it goes exponentially greater than that. And that really does result truly in progress. And I can tell you that from experience. I pointed out that you can't work in Belvedere on Saturdays, but I had a nice talk and call with Vice Mayor Mark today, and he explained to me that you actually can. It's just sort of hidden, or it's, for some particular reason, we're told we can't, but we really can. And if you Google working hours in City of Belvedere, it says no work on Saturdays. So I just want to defer to council or staff on clarification on that, because that makes a big difference. And if you can indeed work on Saturdays for quiet hours, does that mean it just has to be inside the house, or can I have a painter paint the outside of the house? Because one thing I want to point out is in my career, and most of my fellow contractors and subcontractors, time really is of the essence for us too. We don't do better if we languish and take longer. It creates animosity and issues on our projects and with our clients, especially when they're faced with penalties. So I would ask the council to really please clarify Saturdays and really strongly consider a 7 to 6 workday. It'll allow our employees to get to work earlier, not sit in traffic. It'll be easier on commuter traffic, school traffic, all the other delivery services. And it'll, I think, turn into a more efficient work schedule. I also, I appreciate the information for the surrounding communities that staff put together with regards to their time limit ordinances, but there was material information left out, which is the working hours and also the timeframes for projects. Belvedere is one of the hardest communities to build in for a variety of reasons. Yet we have, currently an 18-month time limit that can be extended to 24 months. But some of these projects just can't be built in 24 months, in my opinion, and in the opinion of fellow contractors. And I respect building official Von Song's experience in only having a few run over, but that's not my experience. And the projects that I see that are houses in disrepair or that are going to have to come down, even on Cliff Road itself eventually, there's just no way, in my professional opinion or experience, that they can be built in less than 24 months. I would challenge anybody to do that. And I just don't think it's reasonable to expect somebody to sign up for a 24-month project when it's not going to be able to be completed in that amount of time to begin with. So I would like the council to consider a 36-month schedule. Mill Valley does that. Other communities do that. And similar communities, Malibu and other areas have longer building windows as well. I think it's Los Gatos or Los Altos Hills is very similar, and they have an extended window as well, I think is reasonable for a 36-month period. I'm running out of time, but I will say that I'm happy to see the appeal period was left in, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I appreciate everybody's consideration when we're reviewing this ordinance. I think it's really important for everyone in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate again the letter. You raised a number of very good points. And I think when we finish public comment and bring it back to council for discussion, we can address a number of the ones you've just raised again tonight.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here in chambers who wishes to address this agenda item? Seeing none, is there any hands raised online?
Mayor Lynch, we have Mr. Roth.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't help but think of the movie Casablanca, when the Vichy police chief says, "I'm shocked to find gambling going on here." In this case, I'm shocked to find overtime building going on here. I think there's a dishonesty. I'm going to call it an inadvertent dishonesty in this proposed measure. They're putting the cart before the horse. If you really think, I challenge anyone on the council or staff to look into the Zoom thing and say with a straight face, I believe that the project at 46 Cliff Road could be built in 2 years. It involved 84 pile driving things. They can't be done one after the other. They have to be spaced out. And the city, if they accepted a application that said it was going to be done, they knew that it couldn't be done at that time. So there's basic dishonesty that you're creating on both sides. So the person who wants to build it, they say, sure, we'll get it done in 2 years. The city says, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But they both have to know that it can't be done in 2 years. And that's what's called dishonesty. You'll excuse me, but one lies and the other swears to it. That's what my father used to say. Now, Mill Valley has a 36-month period of time. That's realistic. Do you think they're stupid? They're realistic. They know that if you want to have really nice houses built, and there are people with a lot of money and you want the community to have very nice houses, you want the property values to go up throughout the community, that you're going to have to give more time to build the houses. When you build a really nice house, it improves everybody's property values. So before you get into changing this bit or that, dotting this I or that T, ask yourself, can you honestly say that a house on the hillsides on the west side of Belvedere can be built in 2 years? If you can't say that, and I don't believe you can, then the whole premise is wrong, that you act as if you expect it to be done in 2 years. And I think you should discuss that, because the things that you've raised are concrete issues that have come up. Well, this is a really concrete issue, both figuratively and in reality. If you can't get the project done, then your time limit is unrealistic. And we all want our property values to increase, and they do increase when you have the nicest houses in a neighborhood. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Mr. Rothman. Do we have other hands raised online?
Mayor Lynch, I see none.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment and bring it back for discussion. I had some initial reactions okay. And these are based on some of the comments from Mr. Swanson's letter and from his comments tonight. We had this debate during our construction impact committee where we had representatives from the trades, a number of community members, and some city council members, Vice Mayor Mark and myself on it, and Councilmember Cooper participating before she was elected, if I'm recalling correctly. And so we debated how long jobs should be able to go. Right now, it's 18 months. It's in this proposal being extended to 24. That is a recognition that construction is more complex, takes longer, it's slower, and it's harder to build here than it is in a town with wide streets and big lots. This proposal, however, would contemplate a 36-month project. They simply would be paying for it on the front end at the first 6-month extension and the second 6-month extension. So if you want to build a very expensive, complex house in a difficult spot, it's contemplated that you can do that in 36 months, but you're going to pay a premium beyond 24 months. The other thing about working hours, there was an extensive debate, and we got pushback from the trades. One of them was Jack Hadley, and one of them was Steve Strube. And we were grateful to have their service because they do a lot of work in town. I fully expected support from those two gentlemen, exactly along the lines Mr. Swanson laid out. It would be faster. It would make a difference. All the same arguments we heard tonight. And I was, to quote Mr. Rothman, I was shocked to hear that those two representatives were not moved by that. They were not persuaded that that was going to be important to them. And so we took them at their word. And then when there was debate around the recommendations, and we heard it here in this room, the feedback from the community was they really don't want to hear stone cutting, 10 feet from their bedroom window with a 5-foot side setback on each side. They don't want to hear stone cutting at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they don't want to hear it at 6 o'clock at night. And that echoed or supported the feedback we got from the builders. And so it's a very interesting topic. And but the feedback we got led us to the recommendation that leads us to these revisions here. And I did just want to respond to that because that's how we sort of got to this point. With respect to working indoors, we had a long debate about that. Why couldn't you paint it inside? And the feedback we got from our trade representatives who were on that council or on that committee was very often you've got a sprayer and the sprayer is plugged in outside. And so while the work is going on inside, the noise is being generated outside. And just all these other things, 1,000 different examples that they all had that we didn't have. So yes, you can work indoors on Saturday. And as long as you don't make noise at the property line or whatever the language in the code is. But we were encouraged not to change that because it would invite a lot of enforcement issues. We may change the way we discuss it at the outset of the permit. So we're not discouraging people from doing that, but making them very mindful of the risks that are incurred when you do that work because it's very easy to make noise at the property line, I'm told. Anyway, I wanted to address those points. Any other comments?
I think one of the other big issues that came out, which actually you did mention in your letter, was that right now workers will come between 7 and 7:30 and just sit around waiting till 8 o'clock. And a lot of people were worried, well, if you started at 7, would they be coming at 6 and sitting there waiting around? And unfortunately, if there's music going on in the car, so was the noise from 7 to 8 now going to move from 6 to 7? So I think on our discussion, was actually pretty thorough about a lot of your ideas. I'm sorry that we didn't know to invite you to the task force at the time. But we really did spend a lot of time talking about every one of these issues. And I think we have a report, don't we?
We do, and if it's helpful, we can get that to you, Mr. Swanson. But it's everything you're saying sounds so intuitive. I just wanted to respond to it because we got pushback from people just, in your same line of work who work in this town all the time. So I just wanted to share that.
And I think Marilyn summarized it very, very well, the work done on the Construction Impact Committee. And I had a conversation with Mark about these items as well as Dr. Rothman a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, in particular about a potential 36-month CTL or 36-month permit. And as you accurately pointed out, this doesn't prevent anybody from completing the project in 32 months, 40 months, whatever the case may be, for the larger projects. There were a few dynamics involved in that the very things that make a project difficult in Belvedere, the small roads, the access, the inconveniences, the hillsides, are the very things that make large projects impactful on the community. Tight streets, deliveries, people can't get their children to school, noise, pollution, air pollution, dust, debris, and so forth. So the feedback we had from the community was the biggest way to reduce impact on the community is to motivate the completion of the project as soon as possible. And the conversation I had with Dr. Rothman was, we really looked at two ways of doing this. Should we have a 36-month permit length or CTL and just charge more for it? The concept being you're being very clear and straightforward with the expectations. Everyone understands that it's going to be a 3-year project to get this done. Or do you charge less and have 24 months and give people the extension opportunity to complete it within that same 36 months? Most people felt that the very large projects will take that 36 months and they're going to pay the same amount as a 36 permit may have been, but those projects that are maybe on the threshold that could get done in 24 months will get done in 24 months because there'll be motivation not to get that extra charge for that permit. So that's enough of an impact on the community that we resolve to keep it at a 24-month permit length and charge people that extra amount when they need to go over it. But to have as much motivation, financial incentive to not go to those extra 12 months or beyond, to keep that impact as limited as we can throughout the community. But certainly do understand the issues and expectations would be great that we all have it. But I have to say, through our impact committee, this community does not want to have all projects, let alone the big projects, going in with the expectation that it's going to take 3 years. That was our biggest feedback, I believe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple comments as well, but I thought Dr. Rothman raised an interesting point. Actually, Mr. Swanson raised the same point that it appears that some projects are put forward that cannot be completed within our statutory time periods. And I wanted to just find out what the conversation you have with the bill that you, Brian, have with these applicants who have an approval from the Planning Commission to move forward with a building permit that appear at the outset impossible to meet, to complete within the prescribed time. If you could just address that, I think it would be helpful to the conversation.
Not a problem, be happy to. So that is a discussion that is had oftentimes with the CMP plan, the construction management plan. And with all due respect to Mr. Swanson and all the contractors, they all say they can get it done within the time allotted.
Okay.
We don't have the right to deny a permit based on the time frame of a project. If the homeowner would not like to get fined and has an earnest conversation with their contractor, they might want to discuss not having such a large project. Again, these are things that are well known within Belvedere. The contractors know it, property owners know it. Everyone here knows about the CTL. They know what the penalties are. And if they're having an honest discussion with their contractor, they're aware of those penalties while they've applied for the permit.
Okay, thank you. That's,
it is-
yeah,
yeah, it
that's
is-
very helpful. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone, the committee and staff for the hard work that has been done on this. I was not on the subcommittee, but certainly hear a lot from the community. I think anyone who has ever been on council has heard from the community about ongoing construction. And there's a couple considerations I think we should bear in mind that may be unique to Belvedere. We have an older population. I believe the census indicated that half of our households have one or more residents of 60 years and older. Certainly that has been the discussion in the age-friendly Belvedere group. And for the many people who are working, a very large percent of people working in Belvedere are now working remotely. So what I hear from the community is that the construction noise not only affects their quiet enjoyment of their property, but also their work life, which is perhaps something relatively new from COVID onward. So I think we need to take that into consideration. We do hear a lot from the community about the disruptions of the construction projects, and it's really difficult to balance those against the desire for new houses and renovated houses and maintained houses, which of course require construction. So it's a real balance, but it's important that we don't lose sight of the needs of the community itself. I want to thank Mr. Swanson for providing us with this analysis of other neighboring towns, both in Marin and on the peninsula and elsewhere. I think it's important to think about the demographic and the geography of those towns. And we have, as other council members have mentioned, very narrow streets, makes it difficult for construction, and the very reason that it's hard to execute construction exacerbates the impact on the community. So really, the cities listed that have small streets, narrow winding streets, maybe are more pertinent to the discussion. So that would be Ross, Atherton, and some of the others on the list. So they're not all equal in terms of construction impacts on the community.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want
Yes.
to add one point. So, we're learning through all the work we're doing on communications that our community wants as much transparency as possible. And so it was surprising to me to learn that a contractor was not familiar with the soft hours that we appear to have at the beginning and the end of the day. So can you clarify how that is communicated and whether there should be more just public knowledge of that, or is there a reason, or how do we do that right now?
Yes, I can clarify. In the pre-con meeting, I tell them no work on Saturdays and Sundays. When I first was hired here, that's how it was relayed to me. And the management team at that point said, we do not want work on Saturdays and Sundays. It is too difficult to judge what is quiet work and what is not. We start getting into a he said, she said. We don't have city staff here on Saturdays. They call the police department and utilize valuable resources. So instead of getting into a he said, she said, and kind of a fight with either the contractor, the property owner that has the permitted project, and neighboring property owners of what is quiet work and what is not, because it's not defined in our code. It was explained to me that it is the best course of action to eliminate work on Saturdays and Sundays.
And that early start, that 7 to 8 a.m. period where they are apparently allowed to be doing some quiet work during the weekdays?
No, that's not allowed.
Oh, that's
No,
not allowed.
that is not
Oh, I'm
allowed.
sorry, I
So
missed
the window during the week is codified
Okay.
between 8 and 5, and there's absolutely no setup, what they call rolling out or rolling up, outside of that 8 to 5 window. As soon as 8 o'clock hits, the guys can get their tools, turn the radios on, and begin prepping for the day. Again, and then as soon as 4:45 hits or 4:30, they should start cleaning up the site, cleaning up their tools, because at 5 o'clock they need to be on the road and headed out. There is no cleaning up, rolling up cords, anything like that after 5 p.m.
So to clarify my understanding, in terms of weekends, our code somewhat permits it, but we don't verbally.
We
follow
have
through
some
on that?
loose language that states that work with soft noise, or I don't know the exact language in the code, is allowed. But from what I understood when I first was hired here, is previous administrations had a ton of trouble allowing that work on Saturdays with no response from the city on Saturdays, because we really have no one here but a few police officers. And if they are busy doing something else, there is no response to that work hour complaint or violation. And so I was told it's better to just eliminate it altogether and avoid any muddying of the water, so to speak.
So shouldn't that code be cleaned up if that's actually practically what we do?
We can, again, I'd have to review the work hours code. I don't know if the actual code states that. I believe it's a policy or a procedure provided. So the code states the 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
But I agree with you, Councilmember Wilkinson. We should probably take a look at that policy, wherever the quiet work language is written down. We did look at that on the Construction Impact Committee, but we ought to, I think, consider eliminating that as part of this.
We would like to eliminate the quiet work on
I
Saturdays.
think we should talk about that before the June meeting.
I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but I understand the community. I understand the inconsistency is challenging for neighboring properties and contractors, and the fact that there's no city presence other than the police department on those weekend hours is a real challenge.
Yeah,
But-
my
but-
point was only that we just need to be clear.
Yeah,
What are
no,
the
exactly,
rules?
exactly. It's a fantastic resource for a contractor, especially when you're finishing a project, when you can do inside work on a Saturday, and a great deal can be done. But when you have a quasi-stated policy of no work on the weekend, and neighbors are aware of that, and they see a pickup truck in the driveway, they're going to call the police department. And the general course of action is to err on the conservative side and tell them to go away.
Yep.
Which is expensive and costly and confusing to everybody. So if we have either an ordinance or a policy that does allow quiet work on weekends, we should have the consistency where the messaging is the same as the policy, and
I
make
think
a
if we could
determination
define the term,
to be sure.
somewhat define the term of quiet work, may clear a lot of things up.
Yes.
Because again, a lot of things guys consider quiet work, but it's not.
Yeah.
Painting was brought up. And again, an interior touch-up with a brush or a roller may be fine. But if you were to hire the painting crew and have them come on Saturday with the trucks and the radios and the sprayers and everything like that, it would not be quiet work. Even trim material, we're going to have saws, we're going to have sanders. If we're making furniture, we're going to have joiners and things. Mostly everything nowadays needs some type of power tool to be done. And so again, we would best be served by defining what we see as quiet work.
And can I also just follow up on a point that Councilmember Kivitzer talked about, which is the understanding or the communication of a project's ability to be completed in its permit or its CTL. And I have to say, the Planning Commission as well does a very good job of articulating concerns in relation to cut and fill and scale and scope of projects, exception to floor area, and are very clear with the applicant. This does not look like a project that could be complete in the 18 or 24 months with an extension currently, or 24-month CTL in the future, potentially, that can be done. And I have to say, I've experienced personally and just last month in witnessing the meeting, without referencing a specific property, the applicant didn't care. Not at all, because we understand there will be additional costs, additional fees associated with getting the project done. And we understand that if it's going to take 36 months or beyond, we know that's just the cost of the project. And they're choosing to go into a project with those parameters in place.
But that does beg the question about the behavior, whether we can actually affect behavior.
And I don't know that we're going to affect the behavior of the very large projects that have a 8,000-9,000 square foot on a hillside scope of work, but the ones that are on the margin, or the ones that like Brian talked about, that's 5 or 6, maybe a dozen in your tenure here. You can't do anything about those, but the 25 or 30 that are on those 22 to 26 months, that's where the motivation will be to get it done.
Well, thank you, Mr. Van Saun, for that report, for fielding all the questions tonight, providing the excellent answers. I want to thank everyone from the public who participated. Thank you to my fellow colleagues for the discussion on that. I think it was really helpful. Hopefully we'll have another draft of this that we can look at in June, and we'll see if we can get that going.
So I just want to be clear, we are looking for another draft review in the June meeting?
I think I can give you a call,
Yes, sir.
this week and run through some detailed items and see what a revision might look like.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the open forum. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on the open forum? Seeing none, is there anyone online with their hand raised?
Yes, we have Mr. Rothman.
Terrific.
Thank you very much. I want to express my appreciation to the council members, Peter Mark and James Lynch, who were very willing to discuss this issue on the telephone. Earlier on, you spoke of the importance of communication, and I think that it's very good when that's one of the wonders of our community, that you can pick up the phone and you can call a member of the city council, and they'll discuss things with you. I think I don't always agree with their perspective. I guess that's obvious, but it's wonderful that they do that. And the other thing is, I'm very appreciative of the depth of the discussions that take place at the council meetings. And each of you brings your own perspective, and it comes together, and it's very rewarding for the community that you are so involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rothman. Is there anybody else with their hand raised?
Mayor Lynch, there are no other hands raised.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the open forum, and there's nothing else on the agenda, so we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.